Hello everyone, this is Dan Riley for Sports Talk. Nowadays, the NFL loves to promote the charity work of its teams and players, especially with what's going on with the COVID crisis and political strife. It's a great example of how football players can touch people's lives away from the field. That stuff is what the NFL really deserves applause for. Now, that being said, none of us expect every player to be a saint away from the game. Something tells us some truly ugly stuff is going on behind closed doors at the practice bubbles of these teams. Stuff that would ruin the NFL's good name as a family-friendly high school game played by grown men. That being said, Playmakers. Many of you probably forgot about that television series. It only lasted one season, in a time ESPN was experimenting with scripted dramas. This was back when I was in middle school and high school. Granted, that wasn't long at all, but this was the series that left a mark, and especially as far as the NFL is concerned. No, there wasn't much football in the show. It was really more about players' lives away from the field. And that's where the trouble was. Let me explain. Playmakers follows the misadventures of the Cougars, an obviously fictional football team in an imaginary league. Leon Taylor, a ninth-year running back out of USC, is facing the end of his career and an existential crisis. His best friend, Eric Olczyk, the team's middle linebacker, has post-traumatic stress from paralyzing an opposing receiver who went over the middle to catch a pass on him. Both try to navigate the trials of the team's 2003 season with their teammates. Right off the bat, you can see this show was not a fun and games, politically correct, family-friendly look at pro football. And yet, people were intrigued by it. The truth is, even in showing the bad behavior, terrible behavior of players away from the field, it humanized them in a way that was refreshing to many, many people, myself included. It was even perversely inspiring for some reason, considering a storyline involving the team's head coach, played by Tony Dennison, winds up with prostate cancer midway through the team's season. Not many shows humanize people in positions of fame and fortune the way Playmakers did for professional football players. True, it doesn't make the actions of tailback Demetrius Harris acceptable in the show at all. After all, the man looking to take Leon's job actually lies to the cops during a murder investigation. But it shows how many guys get so arrogant as to think they're above the law during their careers, and how owners have condoned it so long as the team is winning and the franchise keeps getting more profitable. Football players are as capable of mistakes, corruption, and failure as the rest of us. And that is why my listeners should buy a copy of that long-forgotten television drama on Amazon. Of course, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue basically blackmailed ESPN into canceling the show, upset the way the game, or at least the game's players, were portrayed away from the field. Look, it doesn't help we know stuff like this does happen in some capacity to this day, and it made the NFL look too proud to admit it has problems. Heck, in the show, we were sent on a ride to nightclubs players tend to go to, inside practices, into the team meetings of the Cougars, and yeah, we got to follow them on their way to the county jail when they get busted for domestic violence, making us not only feel like we were part of a real team, but experiencing a train wreck that teams like the Cincinnati Bengals became in years past. This show was a treasure for those of us who never made it to the NFL because of that inside look. And the NFL wants us to believe we didn't deserve it. Like I said, you should buy the series on DVD if you can. It knocked the NFL off its very self-righteous perch, humanized the men who played the game, and that's very refreshing, and gave us a chance to feel like we were going along on the ride as men lived a fantasy they'd had since they were in grade school. Not many television dramas can do stuff like that. The series gave us a look at the humanity of the men who played the game. And for that matter, bad choices we are all capable of making, whether pro football players or not, and put it against the backdrop of pro football. That's Playmakers' true legacy, one that should be celebrated, whether the NFL likes it or not. You are just as fallible as anyone. The fact you play football for a living doesn't matter. The NFL isn't a kid's game. It's a violent game played by men as flawed as any of us. In short, Playmakers wasn't just giving us a look into the dark side of professional football. It was giving us a mirror view of ourselves. And that should be enough to give this series a watch whenever you or I are feeling particularly high and mighty. This is Dan Riley for Sports Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in, and so long.